Week 1 of the NFL preseason is in the books, and the Ravens come out on top, but it doesn't feel that way. Welcome to the Ravens Talk podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Njoku, and today we're going to talk all about the Ravens' big victory over the Houston Texans, the injuries that came about because of that, and we'll also look ahead to the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 2. But first, the Ravens win. Ravens get the job done over the Houston Texans. C.J. Stroud, rookie QB, you know the drill. The Ravens defense do not relent against quarterbacks such as those. They get the job done. The Ravens, they don't look as good as you thought they would, huh? If you paid attention to the podcast, of course, then you saw this coming. The hints were all over the place. I sprinkled the breadcrumbs throughout the cosmos during those 4 episodes of the Ravens Talk podcast to let you know what type of game you should expect this time. I predicted the Ravens to win 41-17, but even that being said, I did mention that something like this could happen. The Ravens have a new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. Lamar Jackson held out most of the offseason. Well, I won't say most of the offseason, but he held out a good chunk prior to getting that signing done in April prior to the draft. This is going to be a work in progress. This is a new system for everybody. And the people that struggled the most were the offensive line. And why wouldn't they? The Ravens haven't held any pass protection worth of note in over 6 years. Those guys were designed to run block, to push ahead, to make sure that Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, those guys have running lanes to work with. That was their job for 5+ years. Now, Todd Monken is asking them to protect the quarterback, to disguise, to do things that they haven't been asked to do for the longest of time. So, of course, the offensive line is going to struggle, and that's exactly what happened. But there's more to it than that. The Houston Texans, under DeMeco Ryans, was stellar. Their defense was. Now, even coming into last season, their defense, their pass defense anyway, was top-notch, top 10 in the league. Their run defense was concerning. Now, we had Mark Lane from Houston Wire come in last week and tell us that he didn't expect the same defense that they got with Lovie Smith. His concern was more towards C.J. Stroud, and I disagreed a little bit because I think C.J. Stroud is going to be a great quarterback, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I knew DeMeco Ryans wasn't going to go in there tip-tapping like Lovie Smith did. No. DeMeco Ryans attacks the offense, and that's what you saw. You saw the offensive line struggle with the blitzes that the Texans brought out, the disguises, the stunts. It was crazy. It was fun to watch. If you're a Ravens fan, you probably wanted to see a blowout, but I love to see opposing defenses go to work on the offense because that means that they're ready for it for the next week. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But definitely expected this type of game. I expected that the Ravens offense would kick it into high gear a little later on, and that's where I thought the Ravens would kind of pull away in the third and fourth quarter. But this is the type of game you should expect in the first 4 or 5 weeks. It's just scratching the surface. It's a new offense. By the end of the year, I suspect that everybody will be ready to go. Todd Monken will get a feel for how to call plays. The players will understand how to perform and to deliver on what Todd Monken asks them. So I'm not concerned at all. This is a great win for the Ravens. Week 1, defense allowed 9 points. Of course, C.J. Stroud was an amazing rookie QB in Week 1. Probably my favorite. A lot of people are talking about Anthony Richardson, AR-15, as I like to call him, with the Colts. But for my money, C.J. Stroud was the guy in Week 1. He showed me that he could possibly make it in this league in a top-tier level of play for a QB. So very excited for what I saw from the Ravens. The defense showed out, flat out. Now, there were some gaps in coverage, and that's going to happen. You got Marlon Humphrey not playing in Week 1, and of course, it's Week 1 of the NFL season, and the defense is adjusting just as much as the offense is. So you saw a little bit of coverage laps. The receivers of the Texans were getting open and making plays, but I liked what I saw. The pass rush was stellar. I told you guys last week, expect Mike McDonald to blitz Blitz, 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 blitz. The Texans' offensive line was in shambles. Injuries left and right, so you knew the Ravens were going to take advantage. C.J. Stroud's a rookie QB. Let him make decisions. But what I liked from C.J. Stroud is that he, as the game progressed, he began to understand what was going on. The pace of the game changed a little bit. You saw him take control. I know this is the Ravens podcast, but good play is good play. And I liked what I saw from C.J. Stroud. Lamar Jackson, of course, he struggled a little bit. But again, the offensive line was the reason for that. So don't harp too much on the play of the offense. Odell Beckham didn't have much of anything except for that one huge 27-yard play in the middle of the second half. But do not concern yourself, guys. I know there's trouble in paradise, and we'll get to that. But before we do, I just want to mention it's all part of the process. First game of the season, 17 more to go. I like what I see. Todd Monken did a great job, spread the field out. Zay Flowers, always a threat. And I think that's what he wanted to establish in week one for opposing defenses coming in. If you're going to play us a certain way, be prepared for Zay Flowers, bubble screens, end arounds, slugger routes, go routes. Be prepared. And Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham just underneath. Boop, boop. That's going to be the offensive play. Now, I would talk about running backs, but it'll be foolish of me to do so without first talking about the injuries to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens lost a lot. Let's be frank. J.K. Dobbins, out for the season with an Achilles tendon tear. His impact will be felt less just because of the depth that the Ravens have at running back. You still got Gus Edwards. You still got Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, ready to rock. Harbaugh mentioned Melvin Gordon. We'll see. But we got options. I've heard people mention Taylor for the Colts. No, JT is not coming to the Baltimore Ravens because we have no cap space for JT. JT's not coming to the Baltimore Ravens because the Ravens have so much depth at running back that it's just plug and play at this point. And that's not to say that J.K. Dobbins' loss isn't tragic. The guy held out because he wanted money. He wanted security. The Ravens wouldn't give him that, and he gets injured on the first game. That's tough. That's tough. And I know a lot of fans are really in the business side of this with the conundrum that J.K. Dobbins is in. Like, well, that's why we didn't pay you. I mean, but that's foolish. Why say that? That's why he wanted to get paid, because he knows that all it takes is one injury. People say that this is J.K. Dobbins' last game as a Raven. I don't buy it. He'll be back. Yeah, his contract is up, but speaking logically, of the 31 teams other than the Ravens, who's going to take a chance on him? He hasn't played much. He shows flashes, but nobody knows him like the Ravens, and you know Harbaugh loves J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins will be back. He may not get the money he wants to. I expect there to be maybe a one-year deal to keep him around for him to try and prove it again. He's running out of chances. Yes, I agree, but J.K. Dobbins is not going anywhere. I expect him to be a Raven in 2024. Marcus Williams, torn pec, most likely. I think it's more of a strain based on reports. I've heard that he's had full motion. He has a lot of pain in that side of his chest, shoulder area, but if you have full motion, that doesn't equal full tear to me. As of this recording, Harbaugh has stated that they're still working with doctors to decide whether or not he needs surgery. If he does, of course, it'll be a longer period of time that he's away. Most likely the season is over for him if they do elect surgery. But once the swelling goes down, hopefully 2 months, Williams is back and they need him. Now, they have depth. And when I tell you they have depth, they just brought Daryl Worley from the practice squad. Daryl Worley is amazing. I love him. I love his play. Of course, he isn't as seasoned as Marcus Williams, or as some would say is gifted athletically. But he can get the job done. Of course, a big test coming up with the Bengals. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think the Ravens will be fine at safety. Tyler Linderbaum, ankle injury. Doesn't appear to be as serious as the other two aforementioned, but for my money, he's one of the top 3 centers in football. That's a huge loss. Now, of course, the offensive line struggled against the Texans. Don't expect that type of play moving forward because there aren't a lot of teams that have the Texans defense. The Bengals certainly don't. So don't expect too much as far as struggles on the offensive line moving forward. But that doesn't mean this loss won't be felt. Tyler Linderbaum, his replacement, whoever they decide to put on, isn't going to put up the show that that center would. So be cautious, but I expect him to be back soon. How soon? We don't know. Harbaugh keeps it close to the vest, and I don't blame him. When it comes to injuries, the Ravens faithful are not too kind. So give us what you can, but don't get too much. I agree with Harbaugh in this situation, especially now where you give up your strength and conditioning coach. You think, okay, well, let's keep him out of preseason. Let's let it ride during training camp. Let's keep the practices light. Stop the injuries. And bam, 4 guys, prominent guys, go down. Speaking of 4 guys, the 4th guy, Ronnie Stanley, who sucks, always having problems staying healthy. Fans don't like that, but, it's a game. In the National Football League, people get hurt. Unfortunately, Stanley's hurt again. His is a knee injury. No torn ACL, just a knee injury. That's all we know for now. So he's week to week as well, per Coach Harbaugh. So we'll see. But yeah, these are big injuries. These guys I mentioned, it's no joke. So why am I not falling off the bridge? Why am I not jumping off the window? Because the Ravens still have Lamar Jackson. Because the Ravens still have Todd Monken. Because they have Odell. They have Bateman. They have Zay Flowers. And God forbid one of those receivers go down, they still have the depth at receiver to overcome. Passing is the name of the game in the National Football League. And the Ravens are winning. And the Ravens won in week 1. We'll see if they win in week 2. When we return, we'll talk all about the Cincinnati Bengals, their struggles against the Cleveland Browns, ooh-wee, and if they will come to play against the Baltimore Ravens. This is the Ravens Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Ravens Talk Podcast. We just got done talking about the Houston Texans and how the Ravens were able to come out on top against them in week 1. But now we're moving on to week 2. Division rival, Cincinnati Bengals. Those same Bengals who have benefited from Lamar Jackson being hurt over the last 2 seasons and crept in and stole the AFC North title. The same Bengals who beat the Ravens in the playoffs last year. Tyler Huntley's fumble on the goal line, the play Ravens fans will remember for the next 3 or 4 years until something else bad happens. So is life. Those Bengals are going up against the Baltimore Ravens in week 2. Now, the Bengals got their ass beat last week. I mean, if you weren't watching, just go look at the highlights. The Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Browns beat the Bengals 24-3. And it wasn't like 1999, 2001, 24-3. No. This was 2023 beat down from the Cleveland Browns to those Cincinnati Bengals. What happened? It was a little muggy outside. It's week 1. A la the Ravens, there's some adjusting to get to, I guess, being a football team post-preseason. Excuses. The Browns were the better team that day. Now, we know the Bengals are going to be a playoff contender this year. Let's just call it how we see it. The Bengals aren't going anywhere. But to totally dismiss that week 1 shellacking as a spoof, fluke, would be unwise, especially if you're a Bengals fan. Now, they are division opponents going against each other, so those types of losses typically don't happen. I do recall a Ravens Steelers butt whooping in Monday Night Football, 35-7. That rings a bell, but typically division games are a lot closer than that. So what took place? Well, Joe Burrow stunk. The Bengals were not good. The Cleveland Browns defense came to play. Jamar Chase called the Browns elves, which is freaking hilarious, but it caught up to him. I love the fact that he didn't back down after the game, I should say. Jamar Chase told reporters that there's still some freaking elves, but we just lost to some elves. So I love the double down. I love that. But the Bengals lost 24-3 badly. That city in Cincinnati, Super Bowl aspirations. So you get your ass kicked by the Browns in week 1. In week 2, you come to play. So the Ravens need to be ready for that. The Ravens need to be ready for a recharged, revamped, very angry week 2 Bengals squad. Now, that wasn't what I expected coming into the season. As I mentioned before, the Bengals have been the team that has held them back from many a division title, held them back from the divisional round of the playoffs last year. So I really expected the passion, the momentum, the rage to be coming from the purple, not the orange. But Browns changed all that. So, week 2, what do we expect? Well, I expect the Ravens offense to struggle a little bit again. Now, the Bengals don't have the defense that the Texans have. They lost some key guys over the offseason, so they don't have the guys that the Texans have, and I don't believe they have the scheme to really disrupt the way the Texans did. Now, it's a copycat lead, so the Bengals could just go ahead and blitz. Tyler Linderbaum will not play. Newsflash, he's not playing. I don't know if Harbaugh mentioned that or not. He's week to week. He's not playing this week. So there are holes. Ronnie Stanley, he's not playing. So the Bengals could use that to their advantage. But Todd Monken loves screens, so I don't know if you blitz that much. I mentioned it on social media that Todd Monken loves screens a little too much. But we saw bubble screens to Zay Flowers, to Odell Beckham, I believe, on one play. Not too much to the running backs, but I believe that's going to change over the course of the season. Again, guys, it's week 1, so relax a little bit. But I think the Bengals are going to come attack the Ravens, for sure. And the Ravens are missing pieces on the offensive line that could make that a struggle. I do think that the Ravens will struggle a little bit, but I still think the offense might come to play. You still have Gus Edwards. You still have Justice Hill. You still have those 3 receivers that I love to mention over and over again throughout the show that I won't mention this time. Zay Flowers, OBJ, Rashad Bateman. Mark Andrews may play, may not play. We didn't mention that in the beginning of the show, that Mark Andrews was not playing. So that's one key piece that Lamar Jackson didn't have. And maybe the fact that he wasn't playing made Lamar a little nervous. No security blanket. Yeah, I love OBJ, but can I count on him to make the catch at the big moment? Lamar was running for his life throughout the game, so who's to say what really was through his mind except, please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me, Texans. Please. But this game is different. It's going to be a division game. The Ravens love to play close division games against the Bengals, Steelers, of course, and the Browns. You look back at that wild card game, the Bengals were heavy favorites to win. With Tyler Huntley at quarterback, and to only lose by 7 points, that's the type of game we should expect in this one. But as I mentioned earlier, the Bengals lost 24-3 against the Cleveland Browns. Something's not right. They have a week to fix it. And I'm sure the Ravens saw things in that game that they will implement in week 2. Now, did the Ravens have a Myles Garrett? No. Jadeveon Clowney looked good last week, but he's not Myles Garrett. But the Ravens on the Bengals, and if the Bengals come up in Cincinnati and play like that, the Ravens will easily win. But I don't expect that. The Ravens and Bengals will play a close game. The Bengals will shore up whatever issues they had. I mean, I haven't had a chance to look at the film very closely the way I have with the Ravens-Texans game. But just looking at the game through the naked eye of the CBS broadcast, they had issues. I don't know what was going on. So hopefully, for their sake, they fix it. If not, the Ravens will do what they always do, and that's take advantage. When we come back, we'll talk about one last thing, and that's our predictions for the game, and then we'll close things out on the Ravens Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Ravens Talk Podcast. We mentioned what the Ravens did in Week 1 against the Texans. We talked about how the Bengals floundered, very much so, against those Cleveland Browns. And now we're on to decision time, prediction time. What do I really expect to happen? I think the Ravens win. I think 24-3 is scary if you're a Bengals fan. That means you didn't perform at any level in Week 1. That doesn't change in 7 days. A 24-3 beating to the Cleveland Browns. The Browns aren't the Chiefs. The Browns aren't the 49ers. At least I don't think. Do you think they're the 49ers? I don't think so. So losing in that fashion to a team that many expect to be at the bottom of the division is concerning. And the Ravens are the better team. The Ravens are way better than the Browns, at least on paper. And what I've seen on the field in Week 1, yeah, I could say that with some confidence. So I expect the Ravens to beat the Cincinnati Bengals, let's say 24-17. I think Joe Burrow does what he does best against the Ravens and then score touchdowns, but I think the Ravens are ready. I think they adapt. They have Lamar Jackson this time. They're learning the offense that Todd Monken has put together for them. So I don't see why they won't get it done. I see the Ravens going 2-0. Lamar Jackson throwing his first touchdown of the season to Zay Flowers. For you bettors out there who want to predict something, first touchdown of the season to Zay Flowers, I can see that happen. I feel like Justice Hill is probably going to be the featured running back. I know Gus Edwards is, for the most part, the guy they usually count on when J.K. Dobbins goes down, but I believe for this offense, Justice Hill is probably the better back for this style of offense. We'll see. Could totally be wrong. Maybe Keaton Mitchell, once he gets back from injury, comes in and takes over. But for now, it's Justice Hill, I think. And I think that's good enough for them to get the job done. Now, could I be wrong? Could the Bengals come and play? Sure. It's a division game, so I don't expect it to be a blowout. But something about that 24-3 loss is really, it's not staying right with me. Something's up. And I really, really, really liked what I saw from the Ravens in Week 1, albeit the injuries that we mentioned earlier that may throw them down a peg. But depth is the name of the game. It's next man up, as the Ravens love to say. So I expect the Ravens to find replacements on the offensive line. They have the safeties. They have the running backs. Get to work. It's a long season. And hopefully those guys come back for them as they make a push to the playoffs. But for Week 2, I see the Ravens getting the job done. I see the Ravens getting the win. And we move on to Week 3 against the Indianapolis Colts. Was I right? We'll see. But if you've been tuning in for the last few days, the last few episodes, I should say, then you know I'm onto something with these things. So I'm not going to call it a lock of the week, but stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say. That's going to do it for us here at the Ravens Talk Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Week 1 of the NFL season was great. Some injuries kind of took the fire off of the excitement, but we move on. Week 2's coming up, and we'll see what happens. Can the Ravens continue, grind, build on their performance in Week 1 and become the offensive juggernauts I expect them to be? We'll soon find out as they go against another juggernaut in the Cincinnati Bengals. Thanks again for joining us. See you next week.